July 8th, 2024, here at the Council Chambers at 111 East Maple. City Manager, good to see you this evening.
Same to you, sir.
And so our first topic is an ordinance that I brought forward just for a very, very brief discussion. I promise my colleagues it'll be less than 5 minutes. If it goes over 5 minutes, you all have the ability to call a point of order and stop the discussion. And Mr. Councilmember Fears is online, so Councilmember, welcome.
Thank you.
And if you need to jump in anytime and have a question, please let us know, okay?
Will do.
And are you enjoying Scout Camp?
I am enjoying Scout Camp.
Very
Always
good.
enjoying Scout Camp.
Excellent. All right. So we just got a very, very simple thing. We also have our acting city councilor tonight is Todd Smith. And Todd, you know a lot about this topic. I know that in other cities we've seen retail establishments putting in gaming machines. There's obviously legal discussion on this about are they in fact gaming machines or not gaming machines. So I just wanted to introduce this concept to pursue that. And if I may, Councilor, just ask you a couple of questions and we'll be brief. We talked for 30 minutes ahead of time on this, and I know no one wants to have that discussion, but I was delighted with your expertise on this. And so the reason I think this is important for cities to pursue is because the legislature has basically stayed silent on this issue.
Yes, that's correct. The General Assembly has not taken a strong position on this.
And what's happened is politically in Jefferson City is you've got an issue where you had senators who would not let the legislation go forward they would not let sports gambling go forward if it was not in fact for also these gaming machines being legal in the state of Missouri.
That's my understanding. The political calculus can be hard to follow, but that's...
Is your microphone on? There we go.
I'm sorry. So the political calculus can be hard to follow, but that's what has been popularly reported, that the two issues were tied and the inability to get one caused the death of the other.
Right. And so, anyway, I wanted to be very brief on this. We're at 2 minutes now, and I'll pull the plug on it unless there's, in fact, anyone has any questions on the dais on this topic. But I want to be very brief and just kind of introduce the idea and then let us investigate it and see what we find out. Any other questions, comments? All right, I kept my promise, less than 5 minutes. Unless you have anything else, Mr. City Manager, on that.
No, sir. Nothing else to add.
We'll just start to look at it and see what's going on there. We have no citizens' requests tonight, so that turns us to the tourism consultant. And Mr. City Manager, I'll let you take the floor on that one.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This evening we have Karen Hibbard here. Karen has been studying this issue on behalf of the city for several months now, and we want to do a check-in with the council, give you some of Karen's thoughts, findings, recommendations, and make sure we're on the right path with the council before we go too much further. So without further ado, Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, those that are in attendance here and those listening at home, it is a pleasure to be here in Independence and to visit with you about all that you know, because you call Independence home, but Independence's offerings to the visitor and what they have. It has, let's see if I can make this work. Technology is always my friend. Maybe. There. So, as the city manager said, we started this venture at the end of 2023. You might say, Karen, why you? Well, I have had a great experience of being involved in tourism in Manhattan, Kansas. I retired in 2023 after working for 27 years promoting Manhattan. We are structured part of the Chamber of Commerce, and so I served as vice president of the chamber, as well as headed up the division of tourism there. Manhattan has recently, during my time there, a great group of people, we were able to do a downtown redevelopment. If you have not been to Manhattan, Kansas, certainly we encourage you to come visit us to see the Flint Hills Discovery Center that tells the story about the significance of the Flint Hills of Kansas, as well as why people call Manhattan home. So that's a little bit about me. As we jumped into independence as I talked to people from outside of the community and would say, tell me what you think about when you think about Independence, Missouri. Usually there'd be silence. And then when I would begin to tell them or ask them, have you heard of Harry Truman? Have you heard of the trails? Have you heard, have you heard, have you heard? People would say, that's independence? I had no idea that was independence, yet they'd been here. So for us to be able to tell our story, I think is very, very important. You're doing a good job, but we can always do better. I have had the opportunity through phone calls, through Zoom calls, through personal visits, to visit with over 30 people that are very involved in tourism in your community and care greatly for making a difference in this town. Again, as I said, tell your story and tell it well. You have a great team, those that are tasked right now with telling tourism story. Morris has a great job. He is heading up tourism, but he also is responsible for Parks and Rec. Both of those, all three of those entities, as you know, are huge. You have to attract people, then come to play, to enjoy. It's fun to drive through the community and see the beautiful parks and offerings that you have. Those not only invite people to come, but they also invite people to say, wonder what it would be like if I could live here rather than just visit here. So a question I think that you all are going to have to ask yourself is, how should we be? How should we be established? Is it best for us to be a standalone? I think that as you all live and breathe independence, you understand that to tell the tourism story on its own is a huge undertaking when you have the task then also of being responsible for Parks and Recs. So should it be a division of the city? Should it be a division of the chamber? Should it be a standalone entity? And certainly, how do you retain that oversight? Because a bureau is responsible, is funded through those transient guest tax. As you attract people to come and stay with you, that's where those dollars come from. So you have to have that ability to be able to report, so where those dollars are being used, how they are being spent, so you can show that return on investment is so very, very, very important. As I have been involved in looking at independence in the last several months, I have several recommendations that I would recommend to you as a city commission for the community to consider. You have a website. Websites are very good. It's very robust. As I have been anticipating this evening, again, reviewing the website and offerings. But when people go to Google the website, they'll go visit Independence. It's kind of like you're coming to pay a bill. It's great information in there, but people need pictures. They need that opportunity. They don't need a lot of verbiage, but they need that understanding of what all is there that they can envision and imagine themselves being there, experiencing and enjoying. I would also recommend that you have a great CRM, a database for the folks to be able to use, that staff to be able to track conversations, to be able to track those conferences, those meetings that come into your community, those visitors, those reasons that are held. So you can show how those dollars are being used and you can justify how that moves on. Again, I talked just a little bit about that marketing of independence. The marketing is huge. There's a variety of ways. There's the ability to be able to enhance what you already have. The partnership of Visit KC cannot go unspoken. That's already established, but it's even more so. The world is coming to the Midwest. It's coming to Kansas City in 2026 with the World Cup. We need to be making sure that independence is on the map, that is first and foremost in people's minds. If you might allow me to share one small story with you, I've been in Independence several times. One of my visits when I was here, I happened to be here when it was at the basketball, the Big 12 tournament was going on, and I happened to be in the library that day, the Truman Library. I'm a huge K-State fan, in case you were wondering which color my color it really is. It's really purple. As I was leaving the library, there were women that came in that had that burnt orange on from Texas. And I didn't have any identification. I didn't have my K-State purple on. I didn't have any identification for them to have a reason to talk to me other than just another visitor in the Truman Library. I asked them, "Are you here for the tournament?" And they said, "Yes, but we also love history." This was a must-see stop for us. Again, they didn't know that I was from Kansas. One woman said, "Would you happen to know how far it is to the Eisenhower Library? I'm wondering if we could make it to the Eisenhower Library while we're here for the basketball tournament." So I share that story with you that as you understand the reason why people come, many times communities, we all are guilty of this, of wondering, well, that's what I like, so everybody else should be coming to see that, right? When many times they come for their own reasons, but you lead with your best with what causes people to come. Back to recommendations. How do we fund a community that's already very busy, very active, already is doing well? For example, in Manhattan, we were funded through the transient guest tax, and I believe that's a state statute all the way around, that transient guest tax has to be designated to promote tourism. Our transient guest tax collections in Manhattan, 65% of that went to fund the Convention and Visitors Bureau, or the visit side. The other 35% went to the city for that to be used for other attractions, such as our downtown Manhattan, our Aggieville area, some of our historic facilities, some of our sports complexes that we have. We're a growing community with growing needs. There's never enough dollars to go around, so that challenge is always a challenge, is how does everybody work together well in order to make that happen so you can all tell the story. What are the next steps? Well, with your nod and with the nod of the city manager, I believe there's still more work that needs to be done in order to push this ship from shore. I would think that it would make sense for me to be able to continue to work with the city manager, and whatever steps you take, make the decision on, to help move this forward in a proper way. To identify those personnel that can make a community vibrant. My recommendation that you can do this with a very vibrant director, somebody that is really dedicated to promoting independence, someone that is politically savvy, not only standing before you, but someone that can, as you're on the street interacting with those businesses and attractions, can listen well, be able to put that together to be able to help move that forward. You also need to have a sales manager, someone that is not afraid to not leave the city of Independence, to go to trade shows, to be able to get your name out there. That sales manager needs to be someone that is away from home a lot, making sure that people understand, oh, that is in Independence. I've got to get there. You also need to have someone that is dedicated to the social media. How do they manage that, all of that marketing efforts? There's a lot that goes behind the scenes. You all know, as you're involved with IT, that's a whole world in itself. I don't quite understand how those brains work, but I do know that they are very, very essential in order to help guide and attract people to our community. And then you also need to have, in a perfect world, I would suggest that you would also have an administrative assistant that is that person that is helping to guide the ship with that. Currently, I have a a survey that I want to share with you, and you can read on here. Currently, we are already conducting a survey at our hotels and bed and breakfast. Tomorrow morning, we will be having a training session with the hoteliers again to help them understand. We need to collect about 400 of these surveys, not all at once. Ideally, we need these surveys collected throughout the week, on weekends, obviously, to tell the reason why people are coming, what they're doing when they come into our community, and what kind of dollars are they leaving behind. Because when they spend the night, that again raises that transient guest tax in which you all function with. Currently, we have 30 surveys that have been collected, so this is really early data that I'm sharing with you. I would anticipate that at the end of possibly the year, or when we reach that 400 number of surveys, after that the information begins to be pretty much the same. But currently, with those 30 surveys that we have collected, the average spend that a visitor is spending is $381 a day. You might ask, well, Karen, how is that collected? We ask them what their lodging is, what they're spending on attractions, what they're spending on transportation, what kind of souvenirs or shopping are they doing, as well as dining. So about $381 a day, that's not too bad. When you think about maybe if you went away for the 4th of July, what did you spend? Probably did that, depending on where you went. The average age I thought was interesting. Currently, of those 30 surveys, the average age of visitors to Independence is 55. They're staying about 2 days, and hands down, the reason for their visit was Harry. I've also been very pleasantly surprised at this because you are the gateway to a great airport. Of those 30 surveys, I only had one person that took the survey that had flown in specifically for their stay, and it was a vacation stay that they had come into Independence with. You currently are a drive-to destination from multiple states, not just great state of Kansas to the west. From multiple states, people are driving to Independence, purposely coming. So stay tuned. It will be interesting to see how that all folds out. It's important that as that survey, as you can see, there's 25 questions. It's not a questionnaire or survey that's asked for them to rate their hotel stay. It's more to entice them of what there is to see in Independence that they possibly didn't know was in Independence, as well as what else they can do when they come back. We also want to know how did they gather that information. If they needed a visitor center, there's a lot of information, as you can see from that questionnaire. So as we have that training tomorrow, I look forward to being able to give you more solid answers as to those visitors that are coming. So if you have any questions, if time allows, I certainly would stand to ask any of those questions. My contact information is on the screen. That is my cell phone number that you can call me, text me. I'm happy to discuss with you, as well as my email address. So does anyone have any questions for me?
Any questions? Please proceed.
Hello, Karen. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Commissioner.
It was a delight to be welcomed to Manhattan, to see your downtown redevelopment, to explore the Flint Hills Museum. These things are not undertaken lightly. You had a plan. You worked that plan. It was a 20-year undertaking.
Yes.
With your chamber, your city council, all rowing in the same direction. Mm-hmm. Would you just kind of outline how you started and your markers along the way?
I'd be happy to. And forgive me, you are councilmen and women, and we are city commissioners, so forgive me for that slip. Yeah, this is a 2-minute exercise as to how we came along. In the 80s, Manhattan did a very interesting, challenging thing. We started with putting a mall at the end of our main street on Point Avenue, and that caused some businesses to be relocated. It caused our downtown, Point Avenue, to change a little bit. Fast forward to 2005. We began a redevelopment project on the north and the south ends of the mall. There had been a lot of pre-work that had been done prior to 2005. We at the Chamber had gone forward to see if we could be a meeting destination. Kansas State obviously calls Manhattan home. We often asked ourselves, are we a community that happens to have a major university, or are we a major university that happens to have a community? I think that same thing, Independence could ask that same thing. Are you a community that happens to be a part of Kansas City, or however you want to do that? So when we began that redevelopment project again in earnest, we had the north end that was retail. We have a Dick's, we have a Best Buy, we have a grocery store. All of that had to be up and going in order to enhance the south end, where our Flint Hills Discovery Center was. We use Star Bonds. Do you have Star Bonds in Missouri? We use Star Bonds. Those Star Bonds are used to help develop attractions. That attraction was the Flint Hills Discovery Center. There's 22 counties ranging from Nebraska into Oklahoma that are the Flint Hills of Kansas. It's a very precious grassland that it's a great story to tell. So that was what we hung our hat on, was that attraction, which also then caused us and allowed us to build a hotel and a conference center in the downtown, which then allowed the downtown to become very robust with more retail, with restaurants that were there, that attract visitors to come. We now are a very walkable destination. We're not that far away. I would trust that many of you have been to visit Manhattan before, but we now have downtown. We also have Aggieville. Aggieville is that area that was built always for that of students' needs, and they are now getting ready to be redeveloped. So you are right, that Councilwoman, that was how we all worked together to envision how do we enhance that. There were a lot of late commission meetings, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning. There were businesses that had to be moved, relocated. That is not something that is ever done lightly or easily. But I would venture to say, in fact, I can say with confidence, that the community and our city leadership, chamber leadership, looks back and says, yes, that was worth it to be able to tell the story well. And one more note with that, we will be opening another museum in September this year. It's called the Museum of Art and Light. We have a philanthropist businessman in our community that now is investing and is doing it with their own personal dollars. There are no city dollars involved with that. That will be right next to the Flint Hills Discovery Center. That for a community of our size is pretty phenomenal to have those two things that will draw people into our community.
And may I also ask, at the museum, you guys were really thoughtful in your design. It wasn't just a museum with history, it's experiential.
Yes.
You have a play area for little tiny kids upstairs. Yes. You have a place for traveling exhibits, and you rent it out for social functions. Was that obvious at the beginning that it needed to be multi-purpose, or did that evolve over time?
No, it was intentional. We knew that we wanted to educate. We have a lot of visitors that come into our community on a regular basis. Manhattan changes often. We change our folks that call Manhattan home about every 4 years because they graduate. Or they also get a new duty assignment because Fort Riley is our neighbor. And so we knew that we needed to provide an educational aspect of that. We also were at that point in time, we don't have the answer to all of this yet, but Manhattan struggled with providing activities for young families to do when the weather is cold. We have a zoo, which is a wonderful zoo, but when it's 20 degrees, it's a little chilly to take your 2-year-old to. And so the second floor of the Flint Hills Discovery Center is really focused on those children that are, they just have redone it, by the way, enhanced it even more, from probably about 18 months to about 8 years old, that then you can go on into those traveling museum, the traveling part that changes because that gets the community into coming back to see. So yes, it was purposed, designed that way. Also, the terrain and the structure of the building, when you see that Flint Hills Discovery Center, it really simulates what the Flint Hills itself says. There's not those that built that structure kind of went crazy because there's not a square corner in there. So it depicts the Flint Hills very, very well.
Thank you.
Anyone else, other further questions? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Karen, thank you. It's nice to hear somebody who has a real world, roll up your sleeve experience doing stuff like this, because this is something that the city's been talking about for at least like 2 years of what do we do with our tourism and our sites, and how do we promote those? Do we do the hybrid? Do we do a combination thereof? So we've been having those conversations and dialogues, and honestly, they haven't been very fruitful, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The political will hasn't been there to make those decisions, and I think it's time that our council looks and works with our chamber. Even those things are going to look differently out of the box, we've got to do it. And a thank you to our chamber folks for being here, by the way. So I think the time is critical now that we take a strong look on how our future relationships work and how we mold this. So the difference between a division of the city and a division of the chamber, what is your quick takeaway that works best for you? That what you've seen and what can work, given the regulations and stuff that we
Sure. My experience in Manhattan, we were a division of the chamber, and that worked well for our community, our size of our community. Our chamber is a very strong chamber. We have the approach, as I think works well, of that you visit a community first before then you decide to bring your business to the community. Our chamber is very active in business development, and then joining the chamber, once you choose to come to Manhattan community that I'm familiar with, then joining the chamber because of that legislative voice that the chamber can give to them. Most of our membership in the chamber in Manhattan were small businesses. Obviously, we have larger businesses too, but the bulk of the membership was made of that. So in Kansas, there are standalone bureaus. Those bureaus have to be very strong. And I would say to whether you are a division of the city, whether you, and I am not pointing fingers at anyone, please make sure of that. But I think, again, you have to have someone that is very strong, that understands those political waters, because as Councilwoman noted, we had some really difficult times that we had to walk through, but we still are living in that community that we wanted to make sure that we were all, even though it was changing, sometimes growth is hard. And so how do you make that work and make it work so it's going to work for not just the next 5 years, not just for the next 10 years, but truly for the length of time?
Did you guys have an economic development part of the city, or was it part of the chamber, or how did that work?
Part of the chamber. our economic development, and we held a contract with the city, or we hold a contract. I'm repurposed now, so they still hold a contract with the city, as well as economic development holds a contract with the city. And there are reports that are given. The Visit gives 4 reports a year. Economic development also gives 4 reports a year, as well as monthly information is written reports are given.
With where we're at the beginning stages of looking at our downtown and redevelopment, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for growth, and how do we promote ourselves, and how do we get the word out of who we are and what we're doing. And even in some of the low-level concepts that will eventually get to a good stage, we do have land set aside for a National Front Trail Center that's now green space that can be morphed and work into that. I've always thought that our city has never promoted our history as well as we should. I know we've given some good attempts, but for the draw that we have for our genealogy centers, for our 3 trails, for Harry Truman, we should be making a statement regionally at minimum to do that. The opportunity is getting close to have that. We have kind of a verbal commitment from Congressman Cleaver of funding up to $8 million possibly.
That's wonderful.
It is. It's Washington. Give me a check first, right?
Yeah.
So it's all verbal. But we're taking some very strong stances to do that.
Sure.
To the hotel question, that's pretty interesting too, for the amount of money that is being here and staying. I know Councilwoman Vaught and I, we've been talking a little bit about how does she work on the hotels along Nolan Road and some of those other areas that maybe not using their facilities as strongly as fully as they should, to certainly to present an open and inviting area to the city to where our resident or our tourists can stay and feel comfortable and safe. So there's work for us to do there on that. So as we get moving and grooving with that, I think that will help us in the long run for our transient guest tax.
Absolutely.
That we can have.
Yeah.
I think we should probably catch up and do a little sidebar conversation, because a lot of stuff is really converging here at the same time. And as we put this together, I would encourage the council and working with the city manager's office to see, and our chamber leadership, to see how we can make this work. The time is right to do this, and I don't think we have much time left to really capitalize on the opportunities we have.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but I would agree with you. We need to start yesterday. I can just, on a side note, again, Independence has so much to offer, and I have loved being able to come into the community and seeing it truly through a visitor's eyes. But the one painting that continues to come back to my mind every time I come downtown is the painting that's in the Trails Museum that's around the courthouse, and you can hear the people talking. You can smell what it was like as people were coming here and venturing off on their what their new life was going to be. And that's what Harry did. Harry came back, but his trail took him to Washington and really around the world, but he came back home. And so your trails here, that story to ignite people's imaginations and to envision not only what it was, but what it can be, and what Independence can do to play a part in their lives is huge.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'd be remiss not to say, even though we're looking for tourism and how to capitalize on that as we develop, like our downtown, as things are developing in Inglewood, and eventually we're going to get into the Fairmont area, having those strong assets there for our citizens to enjoy, so they can have a return on their benefit, creating walkable neighborhoods that can walk into the square and shop, the walkability in Inglewood to where they can come and walk. This is how our city was created back in the 40s and 50s with some of these economic hubs, was people walk there. And we want to create that lifestyle again to people can walk from the neighborhood, just come to hang out and catch a movie or do something like that.
Yes, yes. Your offerings. I mean, I get so excited when after I've been in Independence, I go home and say to my husband, "Did you know?" I mean, so yeah, opportunities are great.
We know, and our citizens are hearing that too, and that's what we're working on. Thank you for your input and sharing.
My pleasure.
Anyone else? Well, Karen, I just want to say thank you. Great information, and I certainly will be following up, which is a couple questions I have too. But with the time we've taken, I don't want to take any more of the council's time.
Thank you.
I do want to ask Councilmember Fierzo if he had any questions before we drop off.
No, I'm fine. My questions were pretty much the same as Councilmember Perkins, so I appreciate the input and appreciate Karen all your work, and so look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you know
you.
how to get in touch with me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. City Manager, campaign ethics, do's and don'ts with regards to, so if you can frame this for us.
Yes, I'd be glad to. Again, Mayor, members of the council, tonight we wanted to have a little discussion with the council, particularly as we have a number of issues on the August ballot. We tend to get questions from staff, from council members, and those in the community about what is allowable and not allowable activity for the different hats that we all wear, and as these issues are on the ballot. Certainly not just what's on the August ballot, but as we continue to discuss and have conversations about potentially putting a general obligation bond on the ballot sometime in 2025. So our law firm that we contract, Lauber Municipal Law, has a great resource in Todd Smith, who specializes in this kind of work, among other things. So he is here tonight to try to give all of us some information about those do's and don'ts, and how we can all effectively maximize our roles while staying in our respective lanes appropriately. I feel like this should come with a disclaimer that Todd is very high octane and makes ethics rather intense. So
No pressure.
You have been warned. Here we go.
Thank you very much, sir, for the kind introduction. If I could get my slides up here. Hit enter. Great. Thank you all very much for having me. I know this is probably not the most exciting topic, but I've given this lecture a couple of times, and I always find it very engaging and useful. So let's see here. Welcome very much to the Todd Show. What I want to talk to you about is the importance of campaigning, and which is to say how not to lose a bond election. That's why you should pay attention. This is good stuff. I'm going to give you chapter and verse on the RISMO and what the good folks at the Ethics Commissions have to say. My key concept, I'm going to inhale on this over and over and over again, is educate, not advocate. This is how you stay out of trouble. I'm going to provide you with realistic examples. This is what a city can do and what they cannot do. And again, they're going to be getting this from a fire hose, so I understand it's a lot, but I'm happy to take questions afterwards. Who am I and why should you listen to me? As he said, I'm from Lauber Law. I work with Jeremy, he's my boss. I hold a second law degree, specifically in constitutional law and law and government, in campaign finance and campaign ethics, and as it pertains to the First Amendment and social media, are things that are very much in my wheelhouse. In my normal practice, I represent cities. I do a lot of public safety constitutional law work. I'm a litigator. I'm in court almost on a weekly basis. I have a trial tomorrow. But the main reason you should listen to me is because I speak from experience about campaigning. And now I digress to tell you the awful and anguished story of my disastrous run for judge in Cole County. That is my billboard, and it is definitely me. There isn't another guy with a bow tie. Now, the reason this is funny is I ran in 2020, stupid, terrible idea. I came in 4th of 4. That billboard, a client of mine said, Todd, I'll sell you this billboard for peanuts. Oh, great, up it goes. It was tragic, not my loss. The gentleman died of COVID in 2020. That picture was taken a month ago. It is still up 4 years later. I'm not running for anything, but people still see it. Now, you would think I can't go anywhere in Jeff City where I live without being recognized, and you'd be wrong, because it takes a lot to win, and it takes more than a bow tie and a cool logo and a billboard. And what I want to talk to you about in the scolding that I give, and I mean this with all respect, one of the subtexts here is the capacity of cities to pass things to go on the ballot and then imagine that they will magically pass themselves. If I sign up to run for judge, surely I'll win. I mean, heck, I got a billboard. No. I'm going to talk to you about putting things on ballots and then just hoping the tooth fairy will show up and pass them for you, because it doesn't work that way. But the main thing about this sort of scolding business is there are very unpopular things that city wants to do. Police are fine. Police get a lot of support. And keep in mind, our firm represents 81 cities. So I have a pretty good idea what we're talking about statewide. Parks are okay, but that's it. Everything else is very unpopular, and it will not pass themselves. Municipal elections are very low priority. A lot of people don't even know them. If I polled people, when can you vote on municipal bonding? Maybe one person in 500 would know that election's in February, right? You know what a lift station is, and you know that it's terribly important. It makes the toilets flush. But people out there in TV land have no earthly idea. A bond for a sewer, that sounds boring. I'm voting no. Sounds like it's going to cost a lot and be a tax. I want you to consider the reason you need these campaign ethics is I believe you personally, you council folks, have an obligation to work on passing your ballot initiatives. Time and time again, I have council folks who put something on the ballot and then look around and point fingers. Well, why didn't it pass? It got defeated handily. Did you all go to the fish fries? How many pancakes did y'all eat? And I know it sucks because I've run for office and I've been there, and it's awkward, it's hard work, and it's hot, and knocking doors is abysmal. We should make inmates do it. But that's how you win. And I know you know because you won your districts and wards and at large. You know what your constituents like. You've got to go out there and educate them. It is my professional, respectful opinion, do not bother putting a non-police law enforcement, maybe park thing on the ballot unless you are personally prepared to work it. And again, I don't make light of it. When I say work, because it's work, and you know what I'm talking about if you've had a contested election, your odds of success dramatically improve. You go out and knock on doors and go to those events and educate the public, and it is retail ground war politics, the hardest, most difficult, least efficient. But I'm here to tell you, all the radio ads in the world aren't as good as talking to somebody at a civic function and say, look, we really need whatever it is, and it will be boring or unpleasant, but that makes sense. Listen, this is not a tax to put a jacuzzi in City Hall, which some people are worried that's what it really is. This isn't for salaries. This is for critical infrastructure. This is about emergency management or public safety. Define it in terms that will get their attention, and your odds of success go way, way up. And you won't have that awkward finger pointing, well, whose fault was it that this didn't pass? Because again, these are small elections. Independence is a very large city, but I'm sure your turnout at municipal elections is really, really small. 15%, something like that. So these are close elections. And there is a general sentiment, particularly in more conservative parts of Missouri, just to vote no on any new spending out of hand. It's flat. I don't need to hear the story. Well, the story is the only chance you've got to get them to understand. So that's sort of the big deal. And I think that, and it's sort of rehashing what I just said, that campaigning is essential. It won't happen automatically. And then that raises the question, all right, Todd, you are inviting us to aggressively advocate for our positions, to do that campaign work. What can we do? What can't we do? How are we going to get in trouble? And so I hope the hook here was, you've sold us. We're going to have to get out there and fight for it. How do we do that? Okay. A city can launch its own campaign to support a ballot measure, and it can use public funds for that purpose. That's great. However, Missouri law prohibits, quote, the expenditure of public funds to advocate, support, or oppose the passage of or defeat of a ballot measure or the nomination of election of any candidate for public office. That's in the RISMO. This is a crime if you do so you spend tax dollars to do this. So, well, Todd, how in the world can we spend tax dollars? Here is the lawyerly workaround. This is the trick. And the trick is you can educate voters, but you cannot advocate. You can tell them lots of things about what they're voting for. You can't say, please vote yes. And that sounds silly, and that sounds like a semantic difference, and you'd be right. But this works. This is the key. This is the workaround. A city can educate voters about the measure and when the election will occur. It can tell them in an informational meeting, this is what we're going to do with that money. You can have charts, you can have pamphlets, you can pay for print advertisements, you can announce the date of the election, you can provide them with the ballot language. These are permissible expenditures. You can take tax dollars and say, we want to have charts printed up. Here is the amount of money we're spending on whatever, and here's what we want to change it to. That's allowed. What you cannot do is say, you should vote yes for the lift station. You can say, here's what a lift station is, here's how it works, here's where it's located, this is what it costs, this is how many gallons a minute, all that's fine. You can't say, you should go out and vote for it. You can't tell your city employees to go out and do the hard work that I'm talking about. You can't send the public work guys out to knock doors, not allowed. You guys need to do that part. That's what the elected officials are for. You cannot have a forum and then not prevent the opponents from speaking. If you want to have an event and say, listen, we're going to invite the public to come in and hear about the new sidewalk project. Yes.
Councilmember, please proceed.
I got to jump in here, Todd. I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you're saying what the city can or cannot do, but we as elected officials, because we're working now on a campaign as we speak, going door to door and advocating that way, that is a completely allowable use for us as a council to do.
So you have three hats. There is a private citizen,
Yeah.
and you maintain your First Amendment rights, and the highest level of protection is political speech. So there's your activities in your personal life, your private life. Side note, the scariest part of this lecture is the U.S. Supreme Court case where a guy got held personally liable for his personal Facebook page. We'll get to that in a minute. But for the moment, personal, private stuff here. Then you've got your councilman hat on, but you're not spending any money. I'm going out in my own time to advocate on behalf of the city, as a city person. You introduce yourself. I'm the councilman from District 2. That's fine. And then spending public dollars, okay? This statute is about spending public dollars to print up handbills, door hangers, a radio ad, a TV ad, a newspaper print, whatever it is. Which you can't do. These are things, all these are cases you'll get in trouble, fined, bad news. You can't put campaign signs on city vehicles. Can't do it. This tends to be a problem for departments that fight fires and catch bad guys. You cannot prohibit employees from engaging in political speech off the clock. A significant number of cities in their employee handbook says you cannot do that. Not cool, not allowed. Again, under the First Amendment, the highest level of protection is political speech. Okay, what can you not say? And this is where cities most often get in trouble. You cannot ask telecitizen, you should vote in a certain way. You cannot say, please vote yes on Prop A. You can't have a sign that says, we ask for you to vote yes for the new whatever. You cannot make a conclusory statement. Prop A is the best policy. Prop A is the best choice. Not allowed. That is considered to be advocacy. You cross from that education line into the impermissible line of advocacy. A city cannot invite or encourage citizens to say things like, you should tell your friends to vote for Prop A. All of this is not allowed. So what's the workaround? Advocacy is not allowed, but just the facts are allowed. I don't know how old some of you are. We're talking about Sergeant Friday and Dragnet. Just the facts, ma'am. That is what you are allowed to do. The educational lane is defined by your being a conduit of information, but not opinion. That's how you do it. Prop B will make Mayberry a safer place. Not cool. It's a conclusory statement. It's advocacy. Prop B, we will pay for 2 more policemen. That's a fact. That you can say. Everyone will immediately get it. More cops, safer Mayberry, but let them draw that conclusion. Tell them this is what we're going to spend the money on. Prop C is the only way we can fix our sewer problem. That's a conclusion, not true. You can say Prop C will increase funds for sewer maintenance, and that's true. What everybody really wants to say, Prop D will save our town. We're all going to die if we don't pass Prop D. Can't say that. Prop D will help maintain city services. That is the difference. By presenting facts, avoiding conclusions, avoiding opinion, avoiding superlative. Now, this gets into fuzzy line stuff. I'm a lawyer. I make a living in the gray fuzzy line. That's where I live. That's where I'm most comfortable. But I want you all to be on the safe side. We don't want the MEC calling up saying, look, not only are we going to make you take down every one of those door hangers, we're going to fine you for it. A city probably can get educated as to what will happen if the measure fails. And that negative connotation is the most endearing. That's the most persuasive kind. We better do this or else. You're going to get more attention, more traction, more votes with that kind of language. But tread carefully. Prop Z will fund water tower repairs. Is certainly less risky than if Prop B doesn't pass, the water tower is going to fall down. Now, you want to say the water tower is going to fall down because it's scary, much more motivating. That failure prediction isn't absolutely certain to happen. I mean, the engineers say the thing is doomed, but they can't tell you on which day. Ballot language regarding funds to the water tower means if passed, the money will go to the water tower with great certainty. If this passes, we will spend it on the new water tower. But again, tread carefully. There is an unusual MEC opinion, and I list it there. Volunteer firemen can pass out pamphlets while wearing their uniforms. That's a special thing just for them. Everybody else, don't wear your uniform. What about free speech? Well, isn't this a violation? This isn't communist Russia. We should be able to say whatever we want. Okay, the Missouri Supreme Court, the use of public funds prohibition in the state statute does not violate the first because the statute regulates the spending of public funds, not official political speech. That's a lovely little bait and switch thing, but that is the official rule, and so they can regulate how you spend this money. It's a campaign finance, a municipal spending measure, not a regulation or curtailment of First Amendment rights. The statute does not prohibit any public official from making public appearances or from issuing press releases. So I'm in my councilman mode, but I'm not spending money. I'm personally going to give a speech at the Rotary Club. Perfectly fine. You all do it all the time. No problem. In my opinion, the best practice when you ever speak on behalf is to say, in my personal opinion. The social media equivalent, use the acronym IMO. That is not required. But you will do yourself a lot of good saying that. Just make it a practice. In my opinion, blah, 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 blah. It's not Kevlar. I'm not saying you'll never, ever get in trouble and you can say whatever you want. But you dramatically decrease the odds that the MEC will decide that you crossed that line into improper advocacy. And you state, listen, this is my personal opinion. You can also assert your personal First Amendment political speech right. So that's an excellent idea. You can't require city employees to do it, but you can encourage them to. You can put in your employee handbook, we recommend that employees that speak on behalf of the city do so and put in my personal opinion. Make it clear it's your personal, and it is your personal opinion. There's no question about it. A word about social media, and I have an additional slide. Your city manager saw this lecture in January. Something cataclysmic happened in March that is reflected here, but when it comes to social media, a city can make campaign comments as described here. You can have a Facebook post, you can have your official independence page. Prop B will fund more fire trucks, whatever it is. Lauber Law's opinion is legally the safest practice when you have a social media and you're doing this kind of campaigning is a one-way street. Information goes from the city to the public, and that's it. They can't comment back. They can't give their 2 cents. I'm not saying you can't do that, but if you have a two-way street, there is a danger that your social media page will become a public forum to which someone is entitled to say whatever fool thing they want. And this is the problem. And I do a lot of First Amendment work in our firm. This is always the nightmare. Somebody has posted some awful comment, a link to a pornography site, spam, virus, whatever vile thing you can think of. And my determination is, well, because you allowed them to post and because of this, that, and the other, and it's a complicated factors test, they are entitled to do it. And because that political speech has the greatest possible protection, they're doubly so. I think that the mayor should be thrown out. They're going to be allowed to say that. So you want to be very careful about permitting any and all comments. This is very difficult to actually regulate. You have a very real liability risk when you take down a comment or block a particular commenter. So that's what I said in January. And then in March, the sky fell. Linkley versus Freed was a cataclysmic day. He was the city manager in Michigan. He had a private Facebook page, a personal one. He also had an official one. He becomes a city manager of his town, and he starts posting in his official one about stuff, and he occasionally posts stuff in his private one. This is during COVID, and the COVID response of the city was controversial. A poster started on this guy's personal page, started criticizing the city's COVID response. The city manager initially deleted the comments. He, as quoted in the U.S. Supreme Court opinion, felt the comments were stupid and derogatory. It's my personal page. I can do what I want. So he deletes these comments about COVID and then ultimately blocks the poster. The U.S. Supreme Court said that violated the poster's First Amendment rights, and the city manager's personally liable. This is bananas. Personal page, most people would presume I can do whatever I want. No, you can't. This is a problem. Our firm has a model ordinance on how to handle this. Here is the bottom line. Justice Barrett, in her opinion, gives a two-prong test. The first prong is where I hang my hat. Whether or not the city will be on the hook for what is said is if that official had the authority to speak on behalf of the city. This is the fix. I advocate for all of my clients, you have an ordinance that specifically says, here is exactly who gets to speak on the city, and that's it. This will prevent this problem. And this is a good idea anyway. I mean, arguably, you should be limiting who can talk to the media, who can, answer a reporter's question. I mean, that would have been a good idea before this, but now it's really important because it's not even an elected official, it's a city employee, for heaven's sakes, on their personal page can trigger this sort of thing. So, and again, that sounds like I'm overreacting, but I'm telling you I'm not. I lose sleep over thoughts that a public works employee and their personal page, and there's not like a magic number. How many times do you have to post on your personal page before this open forum thing is triggered? No magic number. What if it's the custodian, right? So my fix is, look, we're going to let the mayor and the city administrator manager speak. These folks get to post, but only in emergencies. Police chief, fire chief, public works, that's okay. But only on those subjects, right? And I know I'm getting a little bit off of campaign finance here, but this is such a big deal, I thought I'd tell you. Anyway, so that's the deal about social media. And these do's and don'ts of ethics still apply. When you make those posts, and again, I advocate, ideally you would have a separate blog post, page, whatever you call it, just for your campaigning. This is our Prop A thing. If you want to have another one that's two-way street for general business, the street is closed over here, the council meeting got moved, the water main broke on Elm, that's fine. Over here is our campaign page. I think that's the ideal. Compartmentalize it. This is only a one-way street. We only educate about the proposition of the ballot measure or the bond initiative, whatever it is, and that's it. And you compartmentalize your commentary to that page and that page only. Keep a tight rein on it, you're much less likely to get in trouble or run into this awful open forum problem. I say awful like the First Amendment is a disaster. It's not. It's one of our great American traditions. But my job is to keep cities out of trouble. And open forum's bad news for keeping cities out of court. Yes?
I have one more question. Please proceed.
Todd, you're doing great. I hate to break your flow again.
No. Well, I know what you're thinking. I'm so quiet, shy, and reserved. And you'd be right. I think my introversion's crippling. Maybe with therapy I could speak in public. But go ahead.
I'm going to try to pry that out of you.
Please.
Are you going to discuss signs, political signs?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll shut up and let you go.
Not a problem. Clearly, I'm not shy. The real miracles get me to shut up, I promise. Okay, the paid-for requirement, boo, hiss, boring, but it's important because this comes up. You've got to put on any printed matter where it says, and that line needs to say, paid for by the city of Mayberry. Don't get cute. Don't try and hide it. Don't put it in tiny little font. Just put it on there. And that's important because the statute specifically says that a political subdivision qualifies as a person. So all the campaign laws are written against a candidate. A candidate shall do blah, 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 blah. The City of Independence is a candidate. Printed material is very broad. It covers things that are printed, I know, shocking. But it specifically talks about signs, pamphlets, advertisements, automobile signage. You cannot put a bumper sticker on a vehicle the city's reimbursing mileage for. I stuck that MEC opinion there because it comes up. A lot of my clients, the members, get reimbursed, or the city employees, they drive their personal vehicle, no bumper sticker on that one. If in any way the city's financially supporting it, that's a no-no. It does specifically exclude little tiny things. buttons, ink pens, that sort of stuff. There is a debate amongst folks in my business about t-shirts. You generally do not see a paid for line. Arguably, it's big enough to do it. If it doesn't cost more, I would go ahead and stick it on there. I wouldn't lose sleep if it's not, but you're okay on little tiny things. The one that does worry me, where I do advocate probably a higher level of paranoia than would be reasonable, is on electronic documents, because you don't know that they're not going to get printed and passed around. So if you have a PDF flyer that is talking about, we're going to have the town hall meeting, come and learn about the new sidewalk project, go ahead and put paid for on there, even though the PDF is free, and I get it, but just in case old boy prints out 100 copies and hands them out at the pool hall or whatever, you just avoid that call. I don't think you're going to get in trouble under those circumstances, but the call will end immediately at the MEC. Hey, there's a paid for line on it, you're good to go. But you have to have the paid for line on each and every one of them. So to recap, and I know I whizzed through that, but I want you all to stick to the facts. Education is the key. That's what you need to think about. It is so tempting to advocate. I get it. And you're skilled at advocacy. That's why you were successful politicians. But this is not the time to get cute. Stick to the facts, like in Dragnet. Don't send the employees out to do your campaigning. If they want to do it on their own, fine. But do not order them out to do it. Not cool. That's what you all should do. And I am serious. I have cities where people say, I'm not getting out in that heat. Then don't put it on the ballot. You're wasting your time. And it's, in a way, almost an insult to the citizenry. If it matters enough for you to take my money for the project you want, and I know deep down you all expect it to pass, hell, you budgeted for it. You're talking about step 17, and here we are in step 2. Trust me. Go out there and work for it, and if not, don't do it. When an official speaks on a campaign matter, it is not required. I'm not ordering you to, but please throw in my personal opinion. You cut off a lot of complaints, a lot of liability. Those few syllables are a great security blanket. Try to avoid the free-for-all on social media. If you open up a zoo, the monkeys will play. I'm telling you, don't do it. Because once it's gone off the rails, you never get control back. You can have rules on day one. You can have parameters. You can define how people can discuss the issue on day one. If you wait till day 100 and the Nazi party's shown up, you've already lost. And I'm not kidding. That's the kind of thing that will happen. Vile, horrible, terrible stuff. Put a paid for line on any campaign material that requires it. You don't have to put it on a pencil, but flyers, buttons, t-shirts, go ahead and do that. And when in doubt, ask your city attorney. There is a significant amount of case law here. There's a lot of MEC opinions. It's not absolutely comprehensive, but if you think you have some clever workaround, and again, I am advocating, well, I would not advocate, that would be improper. I'm politely suggesting the workaround to educate, not advocate. But anybody else has any brilliant idea, I'd love to hear it, and if it works, more power to you. But call first. Trust me, call first. Because when the MEC calls, not a good day. And that, folks, is my time.
Please proceed.
Okay, so I'm at Rotary Club.
Yep.
And I'm speaking, and I take a piece of paper that I created on my home computer, and it says, these are the 14 things that I think are important. That's a printed piece of material. Even though I created it, it still has to have a paid-for line.
It does not, because you didn't use city funding.
Okay.
Now, and this sounds really, because you and I both know you paid for the printing. It was your printer at home and your ink and your paper. There's no rule about putting it on there superfluously. I'm saying if you use it as your notes, fine. But if you're going to let it leave your possession, I think it's perfectly appropriate to put paid for in there, just to be on the safe side. If it bothers you to lie in that line, in support of the city, I mean, some sort of notation, but you don't have to. In that moment, you're in your personal capacity, you don't have to do it. And the only way that you would is if, for example, and you shouldn't do this, is print it up at City Hall without telling anyone. But the paid for line is, look, we as a council have approved a campaign strategy. We're going to get Prop A passed, and we're going to have, here's what our official flyer is. We're going to send off and have 100,000 printed or whatever it is. That's where the paid for line is. So you don't have to do it then and there. But there's no rule that says you can't. And again, I know that there are folks out there who just think it's so fun to call in the city at the tiniest little thing. That's one less reason to raise concern.
And if I'm creating signs in my garage and putting those out, that doesn't have to have a paid-for sign either?
So signs are different, and you should definitely do a sign because you did spend personal money, and you should put in that particular instance paid for by Bridget. Big campaign signs are very particular. They're covered by the statute. They need a paid for line.
What's the consequence if I don't?
So there are three consequences. Arguably, it is a crime to violate these statutes. There's a $500 fine that is possible. That is rarely imposed. Generally speaking, the MEC's policy is we will charge you with this crime and then put you on probation, and you have to pay some small fraction because theoretically it's $500 per sign. So here is the number one massive problem. Somebody forgets the paid for sign on their yard signs, and they have 1,000 of them in Mayberry. And the MEC says, well, shoot, we just forgot. You're on the hook for $500 per sign, theoretically. They don't ask for $500,000. They say, look, you're going to take all your signs down right now, and we're going to put you on probation, and we're going to find you some small fraction of that. And at the end of 2 years, if you've been a good boy, we'll take you off probation and call it a day. That's the basic mechanics of how those MEC violations work. But signs are special. They need a paid for sign on every occasion, either you personally or the city, whoever it is. Now, I suppose if you handmade one sign and put it in your own yard, you might have an argument. But I am not encouraging you to take the chance. Why bother? Play it safe. It's 4 words, paid for by whoever. Stick it on there.
Please proceed.
Well, I'm glad I waited for the sign conversation, so I'm going to dive into this just a little bit. So on the reverse side of that, on MEC regulations, if there's a group who's working against a city ballot initiative,
Yeah.
do they have to file with the MEC as well?
They do. So the MEC requires that you register as a political advocacy group. Don't quote me on that exact name, but if you spend, I think the triggering amount is $500, but if you engage in political advocacy over a certain dollar amount, you must register with the MEC. It's the same process for being a lobbyist or a candidate. There's a special category for initiative groups. Again, forgive me for not knowing the exact title. That is rarely done. You know, old boy that's, one-man war against the city, that guy doesn't have to do it. But if you had, let's say, a union that was seriously opposed to something, they're going to have to register that, and they're going to have to do campaign expenditures just like you all did when you ran. They have to note where they got their money, what they spend it, and all the rest. And these rules, paid for requirements, are similarly going to be difficult. The only difference is that advocacy group gets to advocate, and that is where the city is at a disadvantage. If you're going to use city funding, educate, not advocate. The private groups out there are going to have a greater latitude to say things like, you should vote A. And in fact, you see that. You see it around town. Vote yes on the policeman's bill, paid for by FOP. Perfectly fine.
I'm with the advocacy and working through the freedom of speech and that, but if there's certain rules that's got to apply to all, MEC reporting, 500 and under, it sounds like the trigger that you do not have to report. But do you have to put a paid for by and or treasurer on signs?
So if you have a advocacy group, and again, and forgive me, this is pretty well into the weeds of the MEC rules.
Correct.
But I suspect you do have to put a treasurer and a paid for. But again, in municipal elections, that would be quite rare. Now, when you see on TV ads now for like U.S. Senate races, paid for by a PAC, it absolutely will say paid for by Concerned Citizens for America, treasurer, whoever, right? A concerted large-scale group is going to have to comply with all this. Again, forgive me, I don't want to quote you too much, but you get the idea here.
Yeah.
If you saw there is a chapter of some group that's making a concerted fundraising effort, and they're spending serious money, they have radio ads, TV ads, signs everywhere, it's worth a look into it. But in my experience, and again, this is a rare thing, candidates at that level hire people like me. They hire campaign consultants. They hire First Amendment media lawyers who know better, because you don't want to get crossways, because the first thing the MEC does is take all your stuff down. I mean, and that just defeats the purpose. You mean all of our fancy ads we just paid for? Yeah, they're coming down immediately. I mean, the fine, never mind that. I want to win today. So that really is the bigger hammer.
Sure.
But yes, there are rules that do apply to a concerted, well-funded effort.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
Of course, sir. Anything
Mr. Mayor,
else?
please proceed.
just a question. What should be done if say, a private citizen walked in the chamber tonight and they sat down in a seat that was clearly on camera, and they had a T-shirt that opposed or, promoted, something, or is that allowed?
So I have a very strong opinion on that I would probably prefer to give you in closed session, because I don't want to give the monkeys any ideas. But I do have some thoughts about that. And the crux of it is I think this room is a limited public forum, but not a full one. I don't mean to dodge the bullet, but I do have an opinion on this. I have thoughts on this. That's what I'm prepared to say in public. I'm happy to give you all a legal memo on the subject.
I would love to have one.
You bet.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Anybody else? All right, Todd, great
happy to do it.
information. And I want to say thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have any questions for Todd or anything like that?
No, I'm good.
You're good? All right, excellent. Anyone else?
Thank you all very much for the time.
Thank you very much. With that, do we have any staff reports? Any staff reports?
We had the additional item that the council asked to have on tonight's study session, resolution 24739.
Yep.
This was the resolution that was on the council's agenda last week, July 1st. That item took the resolution that the council adopted back on January 2nd regarding city boards and commissions. The proposal recommendation from city staff was to further amend those rules and procedures for boards and commissions to mimic what has been done by the the Public Utility Advisory Board and the city's Personnel Board to provide some guidelines on attendance by board and commission members. So specifically, this would have added language that said if you missed 3 consecutive meetings that weren't excused, or if you missed more than half of the group's meetings in a year, those 2 items would be cause for removal from the board or commission. So that was the resolution that was put forward last Monday night. I know Councilmember Fears, who of course is online, had an amendment to that he shared with the body, and I would defer to Councilmember Fears first to review that if he would like to.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. This was a further amendment that was intended to essentially go back to the way we used to do committees, but only for the charter specific committees or commissions. And so the idea was that we would have 3 council members on a rotating basis to interview anybody that applied for appointment and then make a recommendation to the council. And that would be for Board of Adjustment, Board of Ethics, Planning Commission, Heritage Commission, Commission on Human Relations, Personnel Board, Public Utility Advisory Board, Board of Health, and Tax Increment Financing Commission. Those charter defined commissions. And so that was the idea here for this, and because of the importance of those as comparison to the other ones, the other commissions that would be handled by the council member responsible either for filling or the individual liaison of the city council, along with the commission chair and a city manager's staff liaison. So that was the intent here. I can take any questions but I'll just stop at that.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
so I don't like the idea of going back to committees. I want to stick to the individual appointments, and I think that this is nothing more than a reactionary amendment to the nomination of Lee Phillips. Nothing was said about it before that, and I understand there were some council members that disagreed with that nomination, and it was voted down, and that is fine. That's the rights, but just like I said, my opinion is this is just reactionary to that. There were also problems with the rotating committees, and that's the reason I was here when we did those, and we stopped them because of those problems, and that's the reason we went back to individual appointments. So if this amendment comes up next week, I'm going to be a no on it. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about, though. Mr. City Manager, currently, I think we have like 34 committees. Does that sound about right?
It does.
Okay, so I'm on the city website, and I don't know if I don't know how updated it is. I'm assuming it is. It shows that there's, out of those 34 committees, it shows there's 14 vacancies, and that just shows a vacancy. I don't know how many vacancies on each committee. I have to go in and actually look at it. So I have concerns, because unless we reduce the number of committees, which I believe that is not going to happen anymore, is that correct?
The direction that I got through my conversations with the council was table that conversation from now, so it doesn't sound like that would be happening anytime soon.
I guess my concern is, we had the GeoBond committee coming up. I think it's still coming up.
Yes, sir.
And I spoke to 4 different people, and they all told me no. And I don't know if anybody else has that problem, but if we start limiting the amount of committees one person can serve on, I think we're going to have even more vacancies. So I would like to actually get rid of that portion where we limit the amount of committees one person can serve on. And anyway, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? Other further discussion? Please proceed.
So I've only been on the council for 2 years, so this has been the process I inherited, which was the individual appointments. But I had served on the PUAB before and actually had been interviewed as part of the process for being named to that committee. From my standpoint, it actually was exceedingly helpful to go through the interview process. I got to ask questions about my responsibilities, the function of the committee. They asked me questions about my interests and reasons for wanting to be on the committee. From an applicant, I appreciated the thoughtful questions that I got before I was nominated, so that's just a different perspective. The other is, it helps me to hear other council members' questions when people are coming up for appointments. I would be making better appointments in the future. I think if I understood the thoughts, feelings, sensitivities of my colleagues, you wouldn't name somebody to a board of directors without the opportunity to see how they fit, what expertise they bring. I think it's a good way for us to share with each other what it is that we're looking for and bring forward the best applicants. Because sometimes I don't know someone to make an appointment to a committee, and I look at the list of people who've applied. It's a way for us to be able to get an interaction with them before they get named to a committee. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please proceed.
So Councilmember Camlis mentioned, she can get a feel for the person. I guess I would say to that is, give them a call. I don't know. I'm going to go back to Ms. Phillips' appointments, but I don't know who. I know at least a couple of people talked to her, but I don't know if everybody did. I've called, people that have been nominated for committees before. And another aspect, I feel like, especially for the district people, that it kind of creates an unfair advantage because you may not ever get anybody on there, depending on how the rotation goes, how it falls in there. So anyway, that's all I had. I did one other question. Mr. City Manager, it mentions the training in the resolution as well. How's that going to be funded for the nominees once they get approved?
We are partnering with the Lauber Law Firm, so through the city's contract with that group, they have municipal officials training, and they will be providing that to board and commission members.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Please proceed.
Since I haven't been part of, this is obviously my first time doing this,
Sure.
and not being a part of how it was prior, how does the rotation, because it says by council members by seniority rotated after the completion of each interview appointment process, how does that work?
I'm going to turn that over to Councilmember Fears. Did you hear the question?
I did, yes. So the way that I would interpret that, if the city manager wants to comment, that would be fine as well. But the way I would interpret that is that those council members that have been on the longest, we would start with that group and then just go down, and after every committee interview, then it would rotate. That's the way I read it anyway. And while I've got the mic, let me just make a comment that I do understand Councilman Stewart's question regarding timing and his concern that this is suspect. For me, it's not about timing. It's not about anything other than when I read this this resolution, my concern was for those boards and commissions that were charter oriented and the importance that the charter puts on those, that the council be more involved in those as opposed to staff and chairperson of the committee. So that's the reason for the amendment.
Mr.
Anyone
Mayor?
else? Please proceed.
I think I'm working through this too and need to think about it and ask some questions. But I think my first thought is that I would want the rotation to be random. That's just my thought. Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
Do we need to make I guess working through this as well, do we need to make a motion if we want to alter this document? Has it been officially submitted to where we need to make a motion, or can we just?
No, that was
I
shared.
don't-
Okay.
Sorry, Councilmember Fears, I was just going to add on your behalf that was shared by you last week without formally being a motion, so that could
Okay.
still be
Okay.
adjusted.
I would suggest, I'm in the opinion as well, as Councilman Wiley, that perhaps we, under 3.1.A, we put a sentence after appointed on a rotating basis, period, and remove established by seniority of the council members, a rotating basis, random rotating basis, maybe throw the word random in there. Would that be okay with you, Councilman Fears?
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Mhm. And maybe we should let city manager and the city councilor ruminate on that a bit. If they have other suggestions, I'm certainly all ears. But I'm comfortable with those options. Sure.
Perfect.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
So, to Councilman Stewart's comments, this has been something that's been discussed frequently, been around on the council, obviously off and on for some years, and have done it both ways, both the rotating committee and both the individual appointments. Both have worked well sometimes, and some haven't worked well all the times. It just kind of depends on what the council. Since we moved back into a council appointments, individual appointments, there's been discussion on whether we do this or not. I apologize, maybe you haven't been a part of some of those, just conversations of, hey, what do you think, type of stuff. But those have been going on. And I'm not really concerned about the district person getting their person on in there. Because if you're not appointing a district, somebody that lives in your district to begin with, there's nothing to worry about. So you've got to balance the two. So a rotating committee can definitely work and move just as equally and smoothly as anything else. So I have no concerns reverting back to that.
If I could just add to that briefly, and that is that, there's nothing, in my opinion, that the way that this would read would preclude any council member from encouraging someone to apply for a position. I mean, I think we always need to be out there looking for the people that are willing to serve the city and do it in we just need to be out there advocating for those boards and commissions and looking for people that are willing to serve.
Anyone else? Please proceed.
I might have missed it, but so why was it repealed in the first place?
I might be able to help with that. So I've had the opportunity now to see this done several different ways in my time with the city. When I first came to the city, it seemed like council members would have some conversation among each other, decide who the majority or by a unanimous decision they would want to fill these spots, and a resolution was placed on. Then we seemed to evolve into a place where there was a little bit more of a spirited discussion about who these folks should be and wanting to formalize this process so that the public could understand how the decision-making process was getting done. And that's when the council interview committee was formed. In my personal opinion only, totally subjective, I think a fatal flaw of that process was it required the 3 members to make a unanimous decision of who they were recommending to the full council. And you could get 2 of the 3 often, but it was difficult to get all 3 members of the interview committee to decide who that nominee should be. And that is when the process was then changed several years ago to go to the individual appointments for these charter listed committees.
Anything else, Councilmember? Anyone else? Other further discussion? Councilmember Fears, any closing thoughts or comments?
No, I think I'm certainly comfortable with the discussion and with the change to make it more random on a rotating basis. Fine with that. I think maybe if city manager could modify that particular paragraph and send this back out in advance of next Monday's meeting, that would be great.
And if anyone has any amendments that they want to put on it, I know there was an amendment that you recommended, but if we could get that printed up and distributed to everybody, that'd be great. Go ahead.
I'll work with the city clerk. Thank you.
Yeah. But anyway, with those changes, please proceed.
Just for clarity, this recommendation doesn't require unanimous approval of the candidate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
It was my recommendation in preparing this for Councilmember Fears to strip that provision out because it did seem to be a stumbling block to getting a nominee brought to the full council.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, one more question.
Please proceed.
So once this 3-person committee votes, 2-1, 3-, does the full council then have to vote again, or is that it?
The process would bring a recommendation forward to the council from the interview committee for the full council to vote on, at which point it would take 4 members to approve a recommendation from that committee, I should say.
I've got a question on the process, and I don't mean to belabor it, but if this committee of council members is going to interview this individual, that would be in public. It would be an announced meeting. It'd be a published meeting. It would be a public meeting, if I'm hearing it correctly.
It doesn't,
Mr.
I
Mayor?
would want to consult
I mean,
with the
we've got to
city
talk about it, I
attorney
mean,
on
but
that.
I want to,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
we'll see
Yeah,
what Jared has to
so-
say, then, excuse me, Councilmember Fears, then
Well-
City Manager. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Yeah, so, I was interviewed years ago for the PUAB. That was not an open meeting, it was a closed meeting. There were 3 council members there. I went in, had the meeting and left. And that was the process. That's what I envision, but I don't know that it needs to be a public meeting necessarily, or posted or anything of that nature. There's 3 council members there, not 4, and so I think it would not require that.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
if this passes, it needs to be treated just like any other committee. And if there's 3 members there, they have a quorum, and it needs to be a public meeting, in my opinion. No,
4 is a
for
quorum for the
for a
city
committee,
council.
for a committee.
But if I'm hearing you correctly, Councilmember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just clarification's sake, you're saying that that committee of 3 is appointed by the council. When they meet as either 2 or 3 people, they're meeting as a committee, and therefore it would be a public meeting.
Yes, just like any other committee meeting.
And that, so really, that would be a question, actually, I agree with you. And I agree that it should be public, and I agree that it should be posted, just like any other meeting. But the question is, let's get Mr. Cover, the city attorney's position on it, give him a position and see what he says. But I personally agree with you, and I would vote for you with that amendment to be applied to the item. Anything else, Councilmember? Or? Good. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? And Mr. City Manager, any follow-up on that?
No, I will work on revising Councilmember Fear's amendment based on your discussion tonight and make certain the city attorney gets an answer to the council shortly regarding this public meeting provision.
Yeah. But I agree with you, Councilmember. I think it should be the committee should be a public hearing, and it should be published and posted, and that's my perspective on it. I think it should be transparent and open. So anyway, anyone else other thoughts? Giving none? All right, we'll adjourn. Thank you.